Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with Jews. Anyway, yeah, I get it, Howard. It's an interesting position that I wasn't aware of, and that I had to become aware of and go, oh, so that's what the fuck's wrong with me. Anyway, folks, I came here with a different topic altogether. Sometimes I found it worthwhile to, take a stroll into the thrift stores and come out with something graphic, comic booky, so to speak. And while I was in there, I found a couple of things that took me back. One, these books were, and they were dirt cheap too. I think they were like $2 each. Yeah, $2 each for these soft cover. I guess you could still call them graphic novels, although some people are starting to defer when they see that the artwork is looking more like comic books. But the first one I grabbed, while I was thrifting for heroes, right, was this guy here, Death in the Family, concerning the death of Robin, not the original Robin that went on to be Nightwing or whatever there. But yeah, it's interesting take here. About the best part, I'll be honest, I'm not particularly interested in the DC universe outside of a little bit of Batmanage going on here and there. But one of the things I am interested in is, from a Gen X position, my go-to guy for the Batster was, in fact, this guy here, Jim Aparo, right? Of course, in, between 78 and 82, Neil Adams had already left his stamp, and Carmine Infantino in the 60s, that sort of thing. There were many artists to come. Frank Miller during the 80s, right, mid-80s, to come in there and, give his... But, for me as a kid aspiring to be an artist and just getting ready, interested in comic books, if you spoke of Batman, Jim Aparo was my guy. So, in one way, it was... it was worthwhile getting. And basically, if you're not familiar, which most of you are, this is an issue where, they put a bunch of the issues together into this one form. But at the time, what they had done is, one of the last issues, there was an explosion where Robin was being held captive by the evil forces of the J-Man and that sort of thing. There was an explosion, and they basically got the fans interacting, saying basically, if you want, letting the fans determine whether or not this Robin was going to live or die. And they ended up giving him the axe. Apparently Denny O'Neil was persecuted somewhat. Like, this is the guy that killed Robin kind of thing. I remember seeing that on, what was it? Comic Books Unmasked, or Superheroes Unmasked, that sort of thing, when they went into some of the history. So it's an interesting point in history, but the thing is, I wasn't particularly interested in this in 1988, A little bit. I picked up some of the Batman cult stuff in around 1990 after the fact. Did not pick up the Frank Miller stuff. It was below my radar, to tell you the truth. I was interested in other things, and there, I think at that particular period, in the 80s, DC was kind of a no-go for me. It was really, I don't know. Once in a while I'd pick up a little something, but I wasn't too interested. And of course, I'll tell you the truth, by the time the death of this is another assortment, right, of graphics, another assortment of the comic books put into a graphic novel, with the death of the death of Superman, the Roger Stern take, that monumental 1992 shockwave that ran through the comic book communities all over the place. I remember hearing later that my cousin on the other side of the country, I was talking to my cousin who was female and oldest of the three sibs, right? And she was saying that the youngest brother, also my cousin, said, "You don't understand. They killed Superman." Like, a lot of people were affected by this. But by the time 92 rolled around and Image was about to get started, that whole period, I wasn't real fucking impressed. By that time, well, there was a lot of personal things going on too. I was going through a separation, which would lead to a divorce, for one thing, and grown men reading comic books wasn't the thing. I was starting to apply myself more to the career I had found myself in the machining industry or whatever, something to make a buck for the family. But during that time, there was a lot of things going on, a lot of partying too, trying to make up for some of the things that were happening. But by that time, I had lost interest. And when I look back now, and I dip into what was going on at that time, I'm kind of glad I did. What the fuck are you doing? Fuck you, killing Superman? Like, what's going on here? You know, we kill Robin too, but it's not the real Robin. But this idea to sell books, like, we know that there was a crash coming in that. But there was a whole new anti-hero overtake that was happening, and a lot of the comic book things were, I don't know, for traditional, Marvelites, or I don't know how to explain. It was a new overtaking of skateboarders and fucking, convenience store hangout bums and stuff. This new kind of, the whole mall rat kind of bullshit, that attitude that took over the, it was a new deterioration, and it came right on time. I'm sorry, I don't want to mention the name that represented that culture. He went on to write some stuff for Marvel too, which was quite good and that, but it's still that period. I remember having a problem with it. I'm going, fuck, we're heading towards a real degeneration here. Not that I'm some sort of Puritan, but I didn't like the period. And I wasn't even aware of McFarlane's Spawn. I had loved the Spiderman artwork he had done, on the covers of Team Up and Amazing Spider-Man and his run on Spider-Man. I thought, well, this is interesting. I was grabbed enough for that, for the last years of that. But I think as I rounded the corner on 1990-91, I was just like, I don't really care so much. I pick up some issues here and there, but I was already, I would return to it later, right? In the new millennium, with a new fervor, got myself a new drawing table and started applying myself to my artwork again. But it was like that. It would fluctuate back and forth like an old lover, you know what I'm saying? So there were those two. But the one I don't, okay, and I want to say, I got these because in my collections I don't really have the issues, but these are important points in history. At least I'll have them as a reference, so I'll put those in my book file, right? Then I came across this, and let me tell you about this. Oh boy, well, Batman in the 60s. Another compilation of comic books pressed together with several creators involved. So, whereas the death of I did it again. Once a Marvelite, always Marvel. Once the death of Superman, that issue came under my nose. I guess the significance of it was its historical quality, whatever. It was a point in history to be reminded of. Formidable. Within the history and storyline, I don't really give a shit. It was temporary. They were going to bring them back. Most of the world should have known that anyway. But, people were affected. And the Batman, Death and the Family thing was more about Jim Aparo, That's worth my $2. We're talking about $2. But what made this one so worthwhile? Let me tell you, this was good because it had, a real assortment of creators in it, you know, on the Batman title. We're talking about, oh boy, you know, Sid Green doing inks, you know, Sheldon Moldoff on pencils, Bill Finger, Dick Sprang, some of the earliest guys. Later, Carmen Infantino and Irv Novak, right? Inked over by Joe Giella, right? And Murphy Anderson. You know, these were big names. But what clinched it for me was the fact that there were at least 5 of the issues that were included were, well, let's start with page 124. Here we go. Let's see. Oh, yes, here we go. What are we talking about here? It's 1969-ish when these issues are released, and we're talking about our man, Gil Kane, right? Who's expressing that figure work that isn't being seen anywhere else. Oh, God. He must have, I don't know. I think of him at DC in the later years and coming into Marvel in 69 and 70, working on that Spiderman stuff. And, you know, his figure work was like none other. Like, he, you know, we became aware that, you know, things were going on with Gil Kane let me look for some really good examples here. Right. That there were things he was laying down even as early as the old, you know, the Green Lantern shift and the times of the new Atom, where his figure work was expressing, right, angles and whatnot that weren't swipes. He was going for prototypes, you could almost say, but I don't know if that's quite it. You know, and you know, one of the tough ones that he'd do again and again, because he was probably at this particular point in time focusing in on a particular view, were like shots from the floor, figures on the floor, which is very hard to do actually. You know, but right, like angles like that, like look at that, Batman's feet towards the camera, right? These angles that could be used as, like I say, prototypes for swiping, which went on quite a bit. But he was doing his own stuff. Here's another twisted form of Green Lantern. Like, check that out, right? This is new shit. And I look at that with Batgirl and Batman there. I look at the stuff, and my relationship to it, I automatically think of what was just around. Look at this, right? You see what I mean by the figure work? Like, it's one thing to know anatomy, right? But it's another thing to capture all sections and dimensions of the human form under a variety of angles, is what I'm saying. And Kane was certainly interested in that. Now, you know, a lot of people remember that he was a bit of a student of Hogarth, but that's going too far. He was a student of everything good he saw, obviously. But I would never compare his stuff to Hogarth at all. Hogarth's stuff was stiff shit. But that's just the thing. It's not just all about anatomy as much as it is rendering that anatomy under all of these angles and shit. And so there was no question for me. Once I flipped through this and I saw 5 examples of Gil Kane's Batman work, I thought, oh yeah, I gotta pick this up. There's no question, right? And we're talking about $2. And a lot of times, you know, never mind just thrifting, but dollar store binning, you can find a lot of things that people overlook. I don't care what the current value for, like, you know, don't get me started. There are issues up on the wall that I see in my local comic shop, and I'm like, are you kidding? How can you charge that much for something that is in abundance? There are so many issues of this. It's unbelievable. It's not like these things are rare. But yeah, oh, look at this at the back. It's kind of funny. I'd never cut it or whatever, but these little cutout stand-up figures in the back cover here. But and the captions, right, which DC thought was such a great thing in the Batman TV series, which was just ridiculed the comic books industry, as many things did. That ended up on television. But yeah, that definitely, the Gil Kane stuff definitely made it worthwhile picking up. That was a deal clincher. I had to get them. But you'd see stuff like that here and there, and I'll pick it up when I come across it. But not all of it. There was more stuff there, but I don't have the money. You got to pinch pennies. But Gil Kane, any fucking day. And by the way, by the time Gil Kane is doing this work that I just showed you from a roughly 69, it was at that point that he made the switcheroo over to Marvel, doing his take on Spider-Man, and wow, right? Although John Romita was definitely kicking it up a notch from the Ditko stuff, which I personally am not a big fan of. I respect Ditko for the foundation and the original creations of the Spider-Man run. And, you can't get around it. I wish I could get around it because I think his work is ugly as sin. I really do. Never been a fan. And John Romita started making his characters more attractive, but it started, I guess heading towards a bit more realism, and the backgrounds were looking, I was like, this is New York now, right? But eventually Romita started getting burnt out, and he wanted a different position where he could maybe ink a little and coordinate the efforts of some of the up-and-coming artists, partnership with Stan. God, I want to call it what it is, but I don't know. I think I'd take on a lot of flack like that. And besides, I'd like to call Joe Maneely to the witness stand, but we can't because he's dead. But anyway, the point is, I want to say that as he was saying, look, I'll do some inking here and there and coordination. I'll do layouts. He wanted to take it to that next logical step for a cartoon artist, which was that was the progression, right? From penciling and inking, and then maybe to layouts so other people can pencil and ink and whatever, But they called in Big John Buscema. I think he did 5 or 6 issues, something like that, 4, whatever it was. He hated it. Didn't like Spider-Man, didn't like all the characters. But if you listen to the interviews, you get, there's evidence that would suggest that there were real reasons he didn't hate it, or that he didn't like it. First of all, we know that Romita, in coordinating and working with other artists, suggesting this, overseeing that, was constantly the one who would educate them in the way of forming the webbing on Spider-Man's costumes, right? Believe me, it's no easy task. There are certain rules and guidelines you have to go by, unless you go the Ditko route or the McFarlane route, where it's just more, I don't know. It's not really as governed as Romita's subtle rendering. And he'd go in to express that. And I think that probably became annoying for Buscema, as many artists, right? So Buscema refuses to do it. Yeah, great, John. Okay, whatever. There was a lot more work for him to do. Fantastic stuff on Submariner and the Avengers, and some Silver Surfer work that came, a whole bunch of things, right? And he's one of the greats. Don't get me wrong. It's just, you got to call it like it is. Not everyone's perfect, and at times they have their moments of whatever. So, okay. Big John's out of there. He's going to do other things. So, what do you got? You got someone from across the street saying, yeah, I'll come in and do Spider-Man. Comes in! Like a fucking, just kills it. Just kills it. His work on those books are just incredible. I've showed on some of my channels in black and white from my Essentials book just some of the figure work in that. That's just, you know what? I got to show it again. Why not? It would be just a teaser, and I don't care how many views I get, whatever. But when he started hitting that stuff, it was like, it was the best. It was the best figure work I had seen of Spider-Man, you know, absolutely, certainly up until that point. I don't think it was exceeded. But on that note, okay, hold on a second. Let me just grab those. Yeah, so earlier I had made several copies from those Essentials, and here are some actually just black and white Xeroxes of the work on Doc Ock with Spider-Man and stuff. Like, just incredible posing, right? You know what I mean? The figure work is so dynamic, it's unbelievable. It's like you look at it and you're thinking, what did he do? Was he working with gymnastic photos or something? It's spectacular. Like, we're talking about unique angle, position, and pose after another. Well, it's being done because he loves to do that shit. That's what he's after, right? Like, that was his focus. You know? Like, sorry, but what? Incredible! Like, some people might not understand why I'm making such a big deal out of this, but my God. The guy was in a class of his own. There's no fucking question. Like, to come in here, there blazing like that, and just laying it down like he made it look so easy. It was like, no big deal. Yeah, I'm just passing through, you know. I mean, spectacular splashes. Here's one of the Lizard with Spidey here. Oh, I want to get back to this one. I want to point something out. It's kind of funny. Hold on. I mean, another big splash there, right? Right? It's like really good stuff. Backgrounds, kicking. They're all good, you know? But look at that, right? Get on the fucking down. It's wild. An incomparable, you know, talent, right? For figure work. I mean, it's still cartooning, though, folks. We're not talking about fucking something he slapped together on a goddamn Mac. You know what I mean? These things were rendered with his hands. Pen to ink, pencil, lay it down, ready for copy. Now, his technique was interesting. He got this smooth quality, you know, for a reason. What have we got? Something stuck here. What the hell? Oh, okay, it's a paperclip. But, yeah, he managed this smooth quality by, you know, roughing out on tissue, right, his figures, and then he'd light box over them when the figures were ready to be defined. Like, look at that. It's great. Yeah, I got a bunch of these, which are just fantastic. While I'm at it, one of the things that's funny about Gil Kane is he was often, you know, he's outspoken and often described as unlikable, whatever, abrasive, whatever. A lot of people didn't like him, but then again, he was, you know, I don't know what to say. I don't even know if he was concerned about that. But he used to say things like, oh, the writers are all idiots, right? He was referring to comic book writers. I think it's important to point out that he wasn't referring to like writers like Fitzgerald and stuff like that, whom he praised. And he said, oh, they no one could beat them. They were the 30s. And I would dispute that and add my 2 cents and say, nah, for me it's Steinbeck, all the way, you know. Sorry, Gil, I can't just agree with you on everything. Actually, there's a few things. But anyway. But he also had a disdain for... He had something to say about inkers, too. Like, oh, the inkers are idiot. Or not idiots, but it's an unnecessary... what did he call... what did he say? Scavenger job or unnecessary job? I don't know. He just felt that the artist should be able to do their own penciling and their pencil work, right? Pencil work and their own inking. You should be able to do most of that. A lot of people liked his stuff that he inked himself better. I don't know how I feel about that because there were a lot of great, what started to become called finishing inkers, like, well, Giacoya. I personally was affected by Jim Mooney early on with the Spiderman work, both in the 60s, early 70s, and even early 80s. And he worked with so many people. Ramita Jr. he worked with. Ramita Ramita Sr. he worked with. He worked with Keith Pollard. And not only that, but he was also, anyway, Jim Mooney deserves a spot himself. But here, this is a picture I want you to take a very close look at and see if you pick something out here. This would be enough, I think, to piss someone off, okay? What you're looking at, first let me describe it before I bring it up close. What you're looking at is a splash page of the lizard with his arms around Spidey's waist as Spidey's flipping and flopping through Manhattan, right? But at this particular point in this particular story, Spidey's got 6 arms, right? And 2 of those arms are his normal arms, which are costumed, and the other 2 are bare, okay? But look closely at this picture and see what might have freaked Gil Kane out when, I think this is Esposito that inked this, I'm not sure. I'd have to double check that. Probably Esposito, but I'm not sure, but just look at this. I'll give you a hint of what I'm getting at. Look at all of Spidey's arms. If you can take a moment to examine all the arms in the picture. I'm sorry if this isn't as clear as can be. Okay? You getting that? Did anyone catch it? You looking at that? What do you notice about 3 of the hands? Can you imagine? This is probably what pissed Gil off at the time to make him say such outrageous stuff. Okay, I'm going to bring it up close so you can see it up close here. So, yeah. Look at the hands around Spidey's waist. That's a lizard's hand. And he's got it covered in a Spidey glove. When the 2 Spidey hands are already in the gloves. You know what I mean? It's a distortion. Now, remember, these guys had deadlines and they're pushing things out, but this is fantastic work, and it's such a shame that mishaps like that would happen, right? But I can picture Gil going on about, you idiot, you know what I mean? I don't know if he would have confronted him about this. I like the idea of him going and confronting him about this. I don't know if he would, but yeah, I've never seen this pointed out, but I just came across it, not too long ago, years after it was published, or after the publication came out. Hey, goofed on the hand there. That's a lizard hand. That lizard hand is linked around the other lizard's, the other arm of the lizard, locked in position around his waist to hold on to Spidey's waist. And he got confused with all the hands there. Well, fuck, folks, we're talking about 8 sets of hands. I get it, but geez, wow. Just screwed the whole fucking thing up. But anyway, yeah, the appreciation for Gil Kane is what led to me picking this up just for shits and gigs, because I don't plan on going out and picking up, Gil Kane Batman issues. I'm just not going to do that. I'm not interested. Oh, the Spidey ones, for sure I would. But it shows me that you know, by the time we're getting to the end of the 60s, Gil's about to kick it up a notch. Like, I mean, why people don't recognize that when they're studying the history of the progression, you look at the developments that are taking place. Well, anyway, I happen to spot it and I happen to appreciate it. But, you know, uh, making a bit of a study of Gil Kane just because he fascinates me as an artist. Whereas he didn't when I was younger, but now, you know, seeing the dynamics of his figure work, you know what? Fuck all my blah blah. It's just great comic book stuff. It really is. And yeah, that was the deal clincher for that one book, Batman in the '60s. Had to get it. But you know, there's a lot of things you can find in the dollar bins too, which I'd love to go through that are worth getting. Some things that the store owners themselves aren't even aware of. Or you'd get them not really for appreciation value, but just because they represent points in history, which are, you know, just makes them fantastic items of nostalgia.